When you visit ancient sites, folks will often describe the buildings as coming under a particular style, like Doric or Ionic. There are actually 5 of what are called the classical orders. Some would say that there are actually only really 3 Greek ones, which are the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. And then the Romans, being Romans, they made up 2 more, the Tuscan and the Composite. But the orders or styles of the building are defined by the different architectural components, their proportions to each other, and then how they're all put together. So here we have a photo of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. This one's pre-fire. Hopefully it will look better here in a couple of years, maybe even by the time you see this video. But it is of the Gothic style. And for those who know the Gothic style, they would be expecting to see flying buttresses, as you see here, large stained glass windows, lots of gargoyles and the like, which you'll see up here, particularly if you've walked around. The classical order has a similar set of features, the most obvious of those being the columns that are used to hold the roof, and that's what I'm going to go over briefly here. There's also the entablature, the pediments, and other components, but columns are enough for one video. So here we have the 5 classic orders on a single page. On the left-hand side, we have the Greek. So those are the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. And then on the right, we have the Tuscan and the Composite. I'm going to break them up and cover the Greek first, and then the Roman adaptations next. The most obvious aspect of the orders are the capitals, which sit on top of the columns. For the Doric order, it's very simple, and I kind of remember it because I see a D when I look at it right here, a D on its side. One could say an upside down D, but I think an upside down D is kind of more like just a D. The next is the Ionic, and Ionic have these scrolls here, and the scrolls stick straight out, as you can see, so you kind of curve around. And so as a result, this is a very two-dimensional capital, and it really gives the building a front orientation. And then the last are the Corinthian. The Corinthian have these acanthus leaves, and it has volutes that are kind of like unfurling acanthus growths, I guess you might say. It has 8 of them. They're all evenly spaced around every 45 degrees. And as a result, if you were kind of walking around the column, you wouldn't really see a front. And the Romans really loved the Corinthian order, probably for this reason. And you see a lot of the buildings put in the Corinthian style as the empire grew and built more grand buildings. Another important element of the orders is the width to height ratio. And so if we look at the Greek columns here, and we take the Doric and we measure the width at the base, and we say that that is 1 unit, and then we measured the height of that column, we would find that it's made up of 8 of those units. So the width to height ratio is 8. If we looked at the Ionic and we did the same thing and we measured the base and said that's 1, we would find that the height was 9 times the diameter of the base, or excuse me, the diameter of the base. And then Corinthian, if we did the same thing, we would find that the unit is 10. So therefore, the Doric tends to be more short and stocky, sometimes called more masculine. And then the other 2 orders are more slender and often called more feminine. It also tends to make the Doric buildings more sturdy compared to the others. And that's probably fortuitous for us because the buildings that have made it to our time have had a lot of structural challenges and earthquakes and things. Probably the most famous building that is of the Doric style is the Parthenon in Athens, which is very clearly, as you can see here, you can see the Doric capitals, and it's a very durable building. It was converted to a church, then a mosque, and it may have come down to us as still a functioning building if the Ottoman Turks hadn't used it for a gun magazine that blew up in 1687. For Ionic buildings, the Temple of Portunus in Rome is a pretty good example. You can see here the capitals with the scroll volutes. very much defining on the freestanding porch the front of the building, and then also defining the sides of the building by being fairly straight. The only difference here is that the Romans also would occasionally make the corners at 45 degrees. So this particular scroll volute on the end of the building over here is actually pinched out a little bit. You can't really tell from this picture. Then finally, for Corinthian, we have the mighty Pantheon in Rome, which was originally built by Marcus Agrippa, which it says up here, which is really nice that it says it because it was rebuilt by Hadrian. And so Hadrian actually put these bronze letters up. That was nice of him. The volutes on many of these Corinthian capitals have worn off. You can see over on the edges, at least on this edge, there are still Corinthian capitals. I think this one might actually have been redone, so that may not be original. I don't know. But you can definitely see the acanthus leaves at the very top, and that's not too bad for a 2,000-year-old building. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, it would really be great if you could just take a second to hit the like and then maybe even the subscribe button. It really helps my analytics, and then I can reach out to more people. Thank you. Of course, the Romans being Romans, they had to create their own two orders. So we have the Tuscan here and the Composite, which are shown with their capitals on the right-hand side. And then we have the Greek, which I have been talking about before, on the left. The Tuscan, is very similar to the Doric. So you can see they both have what looks like an upside-down D. Generally, what you'll see is the Tuscan is more harsh, meaning that the Doric will occasionally have flutes. It will occasionally be a little bit of flourish, not always, but a little bit of flourish. The Tuscan is very austere. There's never any flutes on the column itself. So these are very easy to confuse. The other thing that might be is a little different is the Tuscan's width to height ratio is 7. Whereas as I said before, for the Doric, it's 8. So it's a stockier, fatter type column there. The Composite, which the Romans adapted, was coming from a combination of the Ionic and the Corinthian. So what they did was they took the scrolls from the Ionic and they put them at the top of the Corinthian column, keeping all the acanthus all around them. But instead of having them pointing straight out, which gives it that two-dimensional aspect that we've been talking about, instead they made them all stick directly out from the center of the column. And so it gives it more of a three-dimensional feel. There's no front to the column or side to the column. One of the most famous examples of Tuscan columns would be St. Peter's Square, which is not really square. And that is in Vatican City, so you can see the tops of the columns. The capitals here are kind of that more D-shaped, but the column itself is unfluted, very austere-looking set of columns. And then a very dramatic use of the Composite order is in the Library of Celsus at Ephesus in Turkey. One could almost say that this is really more of a Baroque style building, at least one of the early Roman versions of Baroque, with the undulating front going back and forth in these amazing bridging column sets. And then the Composite is much easier to see if you zoom in. So here you can see the volutes. They are pointing directly out from the center, which is really giving you that three-dimensional look. I would say that telling the difference between Doric and Tuscan and then between Corinthian and Composite are the hardest, and they really require seeing a lot of columns. When I go to museums, I often find that they've been mislabeled, and so it's always fun to point those things out to curators in museums. And then finally, the Romans, being Romans, tended to mix the styles. There's no reason to follow rules, right, when you're a Roman and you rule the world. So here we have the Colosseum in Rome, where the first level is the Doric style. The second level, the columns are the Ionic style. The third are the Corinthian style. And then the fourth, they're not actually columns, they're actually pilasters, but they are of the Corinthian style as well. So more delicate as you start off, right? You start off with the the more harsh of the Doric, and then you get progressively more delicate as you move up in the building, which is the way the Romans generally mixed those styles. So this was a brief overview on the columns of the classical orders. I hope that I did justice to it and it makes your next visit to an ancient site a little more enjoyable. If you've enjoyed this video on ancient architecture or would like to see more on experiences we've had getting to Roman sites, which is my normal long-form video content, please go ahead and like and subscribe and put some comments in the comment field. Thank you.